Welcome to More Than a Conversation, the podcast where we meet and have discussions with some of the most interesting people and innovative leaders in their fields from all walks of life. We will be discussing everything from politics to theology to religion to philosophy to life. Every once in a while, I may just be on here talking about whatever's in the news and whatever I think will be of interest to you. This is your host, Patrick Conley, and I hope that today will be more than a conversation for you. Welcome to More Than a Conversation. This is your host, Patrick Conley, and today I am joined by somebody that is very familiar to everyone who listens to More Than a Conversation. It's someone who has been on before and someone who I know you guys are going to enjoy hearing from. I am joined by my better half, and I am excited to have her on here tonight. And it's been a little while since you've been on.
For sure. Been busy.
I guess since the last time you were on here.
These babies.
Been a lot of things that have happened. Obviously, we've had another baby, and then we had a fourth baby that was living with us for a little while, and she has gone back to be with her biological family. So many things have happened. Any other news?
Raising these babies. Done a couple workshops. Or actually one workshop. I'm working on the second one. Getting more involved in our community.
Degree you finished up somewhere? I think that was since the last time.
Oh,
you
yeah.
were on.
Yeah, there was that.
Got a whole culinary degree, became a whole chef.
There was that. So we've been raising babies and working at the church and tons of stuff.
So raising babies, working at the church, tons of stuff. You know, lately though, a lot of your conversation has been centered around a subject. The subject of family. You've been talking about family and kids a lot lately. In fact, recently you had a workshop, and that's kind of what led to the conversation here. So we've been trying to resource families in our church and trying to equip them. And I think some of that has come from our own understanding of just how important this job of parenting is.
For sure.
You know, when you really think about it, we were just talking about it a little earlier. You know, we got a whole human. 3 of them that are running around our house, and like nobody told us what to do with them.
No.
It doesn't seem like, you know, it's pretty amazing the responsibility of being a parent. And so we've been trying to equip. And so tell me a little bit about the workshop that you just had.
For sure. So I think it was fun. I had a lot of fun preparing, and I really felt like, I really felt led by the Lord to do it. There's a lot of conversations about parenting and culture, and actually we resourced all the ladies that attended Raising Spiritual Champions, and that book is just one that would definitely inspire you, get you to thinking, asking yourself some questions. It's full of stats, kind of, unnerving stats, if you will, about what our children are learning, their worldview, when it is formed, how it is formed. And I think, and I preface this up there, I'm not coming from a place of that I've arrived, but I'm in the messy middle. And so as I kind of glean this information, I just kind of want it to flow directly out of me into moms to help them, because I know, just trying to think of things that I know that have helped me, and I want to be a help.
Yeah, and some of what we have talked about has been very surprising to me. For example, the fact that worldview starts being formed at 15 to 18 months of age.
Yeah, that is definitely not something that we think about when we have these little toddlers running around. It's a little scary if you think about it, how young that they're starting to form just the way the world operates, which we know. I guess if you watch them, you could kind of see that they're picking up things, but it is scary for sure. If you're not being intentional, one of the things that we talked about in the workshop was parenting cannot be passive. I think there was a time in our culture that majority of the people that we were around, whether it was, schools or communities, everybody went to church, whether it was your church or somebody else's church. But there was just this standard that everyone was a good human, I guess, for lack of a better word. But we just don't live in that culture anymore. And so with that, when we want to be intentional and raise children with a biblical worldview, we cannot be passive. We have to be intentional. And those intentional choices have to be more than just verbiage. It has to, it takes a plan. What action steps are you going to take? What does that look like practically in my home when I leave the church or when I leave these workshops? What does it mean that I'm going to do in my schedule? How am I going to write this in? And I think that's important.
Yeah, definitely trying just the idea of intentionality, putting things in our schedule and understanding how quickly that intentionality has to begin.
Yes.
I think that is probably one of the biggest surprises from all of this for me, was just seeing, again, those were some stats. There was a book that both of us read actually called Raising Spiritual Champions. George Barna wrote that, and I would definitely suggest that to anybody to listen to that book. But the idea that between 15 to 18 months of age, most children are forming their worldview.
Yeah.
And understanding that by the age of 13, if a child does not have a biblical worldview, they are highly unlikely to become a devoted follower of Christ before they die. And 67% of Americans who accept Jesus do so before the age of 13.
Yeah.
So that tells me that our children's, a lot of times we think about, student ministry and how I'm going to deal with my teenager and my kids going to college. But the battle for the mind, the soul of our children, it doesn't happen then. In fact, by the time you get there, my goodness, the battle is almost over. I mean, you're at that point, you're not dealing with something that's really changeable.
Yeah, you're almost seeing the fruit of your labor. Like, what have I done in these formative years that has shaped their decision-making skills and even the way they think, obviously, but where they prioritize Scripture, do they prioritize Scripture, and actually how that aligns with the way that they're living, the way that we're living.
Yeah, and so as we do that, and we start thinking about shaping their worldview and thinking about it when they're kids, obviously you want to start, young. I guess even in the way at that age, letting them understand love. There's people, there are people that love me. Starting to understand even anger. I mean, we've got one that's almost 2, and you can see that sometimes when they don't get their way, understanding those things. Barna also revealed some areas of developing worldview. And, we're going to talk about those areas. And I think for the people that are listening, it's so important to understand and to really get a hold of this thing. We work on developing our kids' soccer skills.
Sure.
We pay tutors to develop their math skills.
Yes.
We work on their reading skills. We try to help them in every area we can. And ultimately, every child hopefully is going to know how to read and do math. But most of our children are never going to step foot on a field as a professional athlete. Most of our children aren't going to do a lot of the things that we spend time thinking we need to prepare them for. But every one of our children are going to one day have to live life according to some worldview.
Well, and stand before God. And that has to become priority, and everything else has to become secondary when regarding that. And I think just going back to the workshop that, kind of we talked about, and I know we're going to kind of segue into what that looks like, but giving parents practical tools where they are. So we talked about, if you have a toddler, how to address that toddler, kind of responding instead of reacting. And then what that looks like, always end on a high note, I know with little boys, and we've read and we've actually discussed, he's different than our girls. And so when he's constantly wanting to do, wanting to be, wanting to conquer. And so I have to keep him a little more busy than I did the girls, whereas they were content just, playing or whatever, even in discipline, which would be how this would, kind of connect, but I try to end on a high note for him. And so if he's wanting to be right beside me, then okay, then you can put this plastic cup here, because that gives him a sense of accomplishment. And then we celebrate that. And then, he is busying his hands, if you will, so that he's not getting into the other things. But yeah, it's just meeting the parents where they are, because they have real situations that if we just kind of throw a blanket of principle on, which I think you can do that sometimes, but just actually getting in there and saying, okay, what do you do in this situation, or role playing and actually having these examples that we can talk through and work through with that biblical worldview.
And understanding that worldview is formed in so many ways. Worldview is formed by people who are around us. Worldview is formed by things we take in. Worldview is formed by entertainment. There are so many things that affect the way that our kids view the world.
For sure.
And Barna actually gives us 6 different areas. And I thought it would be interesting to talk about those 6 areas and just kind of give some practical advice for, things parents can do, because there's so much happening out there. So the first one that he gives is media. And then he gives another category of arts and entertainment. Now, I get that arts and entertainment and media are 2 different things. And so we want to talk about them separately. Now, obviously, in our world, arts and entertainment and media go together a lot, but I think we can deal with them separately. So probably we'll talk about arts and entertainment a little bit first, because arts and entertainment would include like sports, would include, even museums,
books,
music, all of those things. And so what are some practical ways, because our kids are developing their worldview based on the arts and the things they're entertained by. So what are some things that you look for and some advice you can give to parents being intentional about those areas?
I mean, I think because these are the formative years, and so we're actually trying to teach them what the Bible says about how we live our life and walk that out. I think we have to be careful what we put in front of them and what we expose them to. I do think that just in the world we live in, they're going to be exposed to particular things, but I think we have to have enough knowledge and educate ourselves so that when that, becomes an issue, or I don't even want to say becomes an issue, but when that is presented, that we can have healthy conversations around this. Well, we don't, because they're going to ask questions, and that's probably something that's a little different from even the way you and I were raised, because I think we all lived in a generation that, I'm not saying there was, I'm sure there was someone out there asking these questions, but it was just kind of, this is what we do. And so when they come to us with those questions, that we have the answers, we don't, just kind of brush them off or give them this, just kind of very simple, like talk through it, because you can actually help them. I know our 9-year-old, if we talk through something that, we're saying, well, we don't do this because, there's scripture telling us, whatever the issue is, then it sticks with her. And then she then almost regurgitates that when she is asked the same question, whether it's a peer or someone, well, why don't you watch that? Or why don't you do that? Well, because, I'm a Christian and this doesn't align with my, biblical worldview. And so that in and of itself, I feel like strengthens a child's faith. If you can tell them why, if you don't just, say, because I said so, because that's not really, it has no depth to it. That's only going to work for so long. And if they know, I think that's the way to go for sure.
So specifically when it comes to like entertainment and the arts, what are some guards that we can put up, or do you have things you consider? For example,
well, you do VidAngel.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. VidAngel would be one. When it comes to like entertainment, I think it's important for us to separate like sports entertainment. It's important for us to separate to our kids as they start learning about these people, that just because someone is a good athlete doesn't mean that they're a spokesperson for life. Or just because a person made a movie that you like doesn't mean that that person is a person whose opinion matters on the things of life. You know, if our kids, if we're not careful, we're gonna have our kids getting their worldview from people who are completely living antithetical to everything that we believe simply because they're popular. And that's something that's happened in America, probably not just America, but it's where I live, so it's where I know. But where we've made people who are popular for other things, popular for sports, popular for whatever the thing might be, we've made them experts on everything.
For sure.
But at the end of the day, I don't care what Tom Cruise thinks about life.
Yeah.
You know, Tom Cruise doesn't get to tell me about life. And I'm not picking on Tom Cruise. I don't even know if Tom Cruise still makes movies, but just a name. But, you know, I don't care what some celebrity thinks about this stuff because because I like their movie, or because I like their music, or because, you know, they're really good. They're really fast running with the football, or whatever the thing might be. And
you can have those conversations about they're talented in these areas, but we don't, you know, again, glean our worldview from them. We get that from the Bible.
It just had a great example here in South Carolina. You had the South Carolina women's basketball team, the Gamecocks. They won the national championship. Dawn Staley, the coach, incredible basketball coach.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. Comes out, says she wants to give credit to God for the victory.
Awesome.
But, you know, at the same time, she is saying that she is for men playing women's sports.
Yeah.
So, you know, she's giving a view on life and gender. At the end of the day, she's not an expert on life and gender. She's not, and this is not her field. Like, I don't know. Number one, I don't know why we try to create moments in the media to hear these people's opinions. I think sometimes just because.
Well, for sure. Sometimes it's an agenda.
Sure. Yeah. It's an agenda, and controversy sells. And,
yes. Fear. Yeah. All the things.
But if my daughter, you know, and I got two daughters, if they happen to like basketball, which they don't at this point, but maybe they will. Right now it's soccer. But if they happen to like basketball, and they were Gamecocks fans, and they're looking up to her, well, I've got to be ready to have that conversation. I think that's the other thing when it comes to entertainment. Sometimes I think Christians work so hard to guard our kids.
Yes.
And we must. But sometimes we try to guard them, but when they do hear something, we're not prepared, like you just said, to answer the question or to have the conversation because we don't know what we believe.
Yes. And that is, I feel like, where we are kind of in the messy middle, where we're like, okay, what does this look like? Because there are different things that are going to come up. And I think that's where you have to say, that's where our boundary is. You know, if they are saying something that, doesn't align with, scripture, then our kids need to be so consumed with the word, honestly, that when they hear error, there's something in their spirit that says, no, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right. And so you, again, teach them truth so that when they hear anything else, that's the measure.
And
truth is the measure.
Parents, right?
Yes.
As parents, we have to be ready to know, okay, that doesn't fit, because so we'll talk about VidAngel. That's a great one. We'll talk about that in a second. But like, VidAngel blocks out content.
Yes.
But VidAngel doesn't block out worldview.
No.
So like, you can take out all the curse words, take out all the nudity, take out references to drugs, and still get a worldview
for sure
that is completely against the biblical worldview.
Yes.
And especially with kids entertainment, because a lot of those things aren't in there anyway. Yeah. They are very good at sneaking a worldview in.
Well, absolutely.
And we'll catch, like, it'll be so obvious, well, if we see a homosexual couple, like, on a screen, we catch that instantly, right? And we'll go, oh, that's the LGBT agenda.
Yeah.
But what about all the other agendas that are happening?
Yeah.
And that aren't so obvious, and they slip it in?
Well, it's the verbiage, and it's to desensitize you, to it so that you become tolerant. And if you can become tolerant of it, then by, so many times, it's kind of like that triangle that we talked about. So it pricks you at first, and and then after a while, it's just so dull that you're just like, oh, it's not. And then that's when you start, kind of parenting passively, where it's not that big of a deal.
Passive parenting.
Because you have become tolerant of it. But we know that all we have to do is tolerate something. There are things that you would never tolerate. If someone come in this door tonight, which I think we'd both be fighting them, but if someone come in this door, we're not going to tolerate them harming our kids, you know, and it's, well, God loves it. And yes, God does love them and Jesus loves them, but you're not going to hurt my kids. I'm not going to tolerate that. And so I think when we look at these types of situations, there are things that we can't tolerate because we have Christ that abides in us and he doesn't tolerate it. And so that's where you really kind of see, well, who does rule your life? You know, he is our savior when we want to be saved from damnation, but is he the Lord of our life, which is going to be contingent upon the way that we actually walk it out.
And are we raising our kids as if they actually belong to him and we are just stewards of our children?
Stewardship is important.
So arts and entertainment, you know, again, music is probably another one that's a big area. It's important to know the lyrics to understand. And again, that goes back, you use that word, very good word, passive parenting, just going along. Like if a parent doesn't know what's in, again, now your kids getting older, they can hide things, they can do those things, but you should have access to all your kids' devices, all their playlists. And you know what? You might need to grab their playlist and start Googling some lyrics. Yeah. You might need to start checking some things out.
What matters, you were talking about it Sunday about the music and how it affects you spiritually.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. And it just, again, that term, again, a great word. I don't want to keep going back and repeating it, but great passive parenting. So many parents are just, and it's not because they're bad. It's because they're overwhelmed.
Yes.
And because sometimes we're just not taking that responsibility. And that goes for moms, for dads, men have to be engaged. They have to actually engage in these things, engage in the lives of their kids, know what's happening, listen, hear what's going on. In fact, when we get off the podcast, I heard one of our kids say something to one of the other ones tonight, a few minutes ago before we started recording. And I was like, I want to ask them about that conversation. I want to find out what was going on there. Because we try to converse with our kids, but again, passive parenting. Now, some specific things too. You mentioned VidAngel. So for those that are listening, VidAngel is a resource that can actually filter. They make some of their own content, which is good, clean content.
This is not sponsored.
Right. Yeah. This is not sponsored by VidAngel, but if they want to send us over, actually, you know what? Just give me that $10 off a month for the filter.
For sure.
But no, VidAngel, actually, they're the people that are, VidAngel Studios is behind, or Angel Studios, I guess what they call it. They're behind The Chosen and some other things, but they have a service that you can actually filter out content on most things that are on Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah, I think so. Amazon Prime.
Maybe some of the other sources as well. Now, they have some sort of lawsuit tiff going on between them and Disney, ABC, something, so they can't do their content. But there's another service out there called ClearPlay. The only difference is VidAngel does have an app, which makes it easier. ClearPlay, I think you have to do it from a computer, but whatever. But they're another one that does it. But I personally, that's another thing. Legally, that's an issue that we should be addressing as a country, because it is legal to filter DVDs, but nobody's watching DVDs anymore. Yeah. But there's laws that won't allow them just to filter content without permission of studios, and parents should have the right. They've already decided they have the right. They just need to go update that law to cover for streaming as well. A couple other things too with the movies. And the entertainment, there's something called Common Sense Media that's usually pretty good. They do reviews. I think they might even do games and books as well.
I think so.
And then Plugged In is another one that you can go check. And so we check those things. Dove.org, DOVE.org, Dove.org. They do Dove approved movies. And so like it's nothing for us before we watch a movie for me to check 3 or 4 websites before I show it to my kids. Particularly now, VidAngel does help a lot, but we do that research. Now, is that a bit of a pain sometimes?
I was going to say, I wanted to go back to that. Like it's going to take some intentionality. You might have to, take a couple extra steps before you press play, but you have 3 children that one day are going to be adults that we want to have this biblical worldview, that we want them to know that we prioritize Christ and his teachings. And sometimes, obviously in the culture we live in, it's just something that you're going to have to do if that is a priority in your life. And as Christians, it is a pain, because I know, like, sometimes we'll be ready for movie night and I'll have all the popcorn, all the drinks and stuff, and you're still scrolling, and I'm like, is this a good one yet? And you're like, hold on, I've got a couple more. So the research that goes back to educating ourselves, that honestly goes back to how many conversations have you had to have, like with one of the kids, about why we don't watch this and why this is something that, we're not going to promote.
But at the end of the day, there's some things that my kids are going to hear about for the first time. Well, they're only going to hear about for the first time once.
Yes.
My kids are only going to see some things for the first time.
For sure.
Once.
Yes.
And I don't want to expose them to something. I want to control things as much as I can to be able to have that conversation. So when that time comes,
yes,
that something does get through, or they're somewhere else and they see something or they hear something, that we've got that worldview instilled in them. So yeah, let's move forward though. We could talk about arts and entertainment all night long, but arts and entertainment, then media. So media covering a lot of other things, covering social media, all those things. And look, if I'm honest, so you and I are sitting here having this conversation. We try to have these conversations as much like what we would do in a normal situation. But obviously, even right now, I'm giving commentary for the listener, right? But we've talked about this, like social media.
Yes.
Like your child's childhood is over the day they get a social media account. They're not kids anymore. They're instantly going to be exposed to things.
There's definitely a fear around that exposure and what that looks like. I've read so many books. The stats are not good around kids with social media.
And don't even the companies have, like, isn't it like 13?
Oh, gracious.
Before Facebook and Instagram?
Yes, gracious. The movie that we watched just left me. The Social Dilemma. I think Fred Garment actually recommended that when we were in Leader Labs. But The Social Dilemma, literally these big tech companies, the CEOs of these companies are not even allowing their children to be exposed to some of these platforms. And we're just giving our kids the phone, because that's what you do and all these things. And I'm over here like, no, and obviously there's a fear around them, I don't even want to say fear, just I guess a little bit of apprehension about them growing up and how will they navigate this. But it just complicates what you're trying to do, because in a moment they are just exposed to all the things, and nobody, as far as these social media platforms, there are no boundaries. It's just like you're throwing them out there to the wolves.
Yeah, absolutely. And you gotta be so, again, you can't be passive.
No.
But when you put your kid out there, in fact, right now, I think there's some places where they're working to pass laws. There's some content on the internet that is so lewd and so out there. And now they're trying to pass laws that require people to input like ID to be able to access those parts of the internet. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Keep kids out of there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Those boundaries
there should be like the smut that's out there should not be easily accessed like that because of the danger to kids, much less what it does to adults. We know it's dangerous to adults, for sure, relationships. Kids, though, you're causing real, actual damage to these kids. And on top of that, not just those things, the filthiest of filthy things that are out there, but also social media now. They're working on laws to say that no minor can have social media. And some would say that's extreme. But I think it's sad that the government's having to step in and do what we ought to be doing for so many reasons. Worldview is not just, here's a sin that we're forcing on your kid. And I guess anything that's not of God's worldview is sinful. But to make it simple, it's not some great big, hey, here's this thing but it's also just when our daughters get on there and start comparing their body, their image.
Yes. It's the mental strain that it puts on them. There are so many stories. There are so many stats around we're longing for connection, but that is like not where you go to get connection, right? Not real, authentic connection. And so it is creating, it is changing the way that our brains are wired. We talked about that a little bit. And I want to preface this by saying I don't think people are terrible parents because their kids have phones and social and stuff. It is dangerous. And if there are guardrails and boundaries and there are strict rules around that because it can be dangerous, just safety even.
There
you
are
talk about
monsters
yes
out there.
They're just preying on our kids, and you don't know what you don't know, right? So those boundaries and guardrails are so important because God forbid their safety become an issue. But it just making parents aware that, hey, this is a real issue, and it may seem like so small, but we really have to be forward thinking in that and be a couple steps ahead, because we have to have these conversations to where kind of enforce these rules, I guess, that they know we are doing it from a place of love and not from a place of, well, I don't really know why that I won't let you do this, but I'm not going to let you do it because, maybe the pastor won't let his kids, so I'm not going to. No, we need to know why. And we need to be able to sit down and have real conversations about why we put these boundaries in our lives.
Hey, More Than a Conversation listeners, I hope that you are enjoying this conversation as much as I am, and I hope that you're getting something great out of it today. I'm just wanting to jump in here in the middle to take a moment and let you know a few ways that you can help out More Than a Conversation. First, wherever you're listening, please go ahead and click that subscribe button. That will definitely help, and that'll make sure that you get all the content. Also, if you have a way to rate, if your app allows you to give a 4-star, 5-star, whatever the rating is that's the top rating, I would so appreciate if you would go ahead and drop a rating there. That's how the aggregators and the distributors rank podcasts, and the higher the ranking you give, the more ears will be able to hear these great conversations. Thanks again, and I'm hoping that today has been more than a conversation for you. Now let's get back to it.
Speaking of boundaries, next thing that affects worldview, schools, family, peers. Let's talk about family. What do you do when you have family that is carrying a different worldview than what you're trying to put into your kids?
Yeah, I'm sure that makes it a little more difficult, right? Because it's just not someone or somebody on the internet out there, right? There, you know what I mean? That you can just kind of say, oh, no more. I think you still have to be ready for real conversations if you're going to continue to have a relationship or a close relationship with those family members. They have to respect your boundaries in order for that to be healthy, right? But I would also say you have to make those boundaries known. You can't just, gain all this information and educate yourself and then just be on an island somewhere. You have to say, this is the way that we're, going to raise these babies. And this is kind of what we're looking at. Family can agree or disagree, but at the end of the day, in order to maintain that relationship, there probably is going to have to be some really hard conversations that are uncomfortable, but it is very important that you have them.
I think it's important for us to understand that the biblical concept of family says that husband and wife leave and cleave. Extended family is good.
Absolutely.
It can be great. It can be very beneficial. But when you have children, your responsibility is not the comfort and the feelings of aunts and uncles and cousins and moms and dads and grandparents. Your priority is raising those kids.
Yes.
And that goes into every area of boundary. It goes into, hey, if you can't control your conversation around my kids, you don't get access to my kids. If I can't let my kids be with you, if you're taking somebody else's kid, find out what you're going to, if you're going to take them to a movie, talk to the parents about it. If you're going to show them a show, talk to the parents about it. You're going to take them to a concert, let them know what's going on. Those are things you can do to not, upset someone because of their boundaries. But ultimately, if a person is displaying a worldview and they can't respect you enough, hey, I don't want my kids watching that on TV. So when I come to your house, if you can turn that off, I can't control what you do. But if you can't do that, then I'm not going to come to your house, right? Or if you are, I think another one, probably boundaries, would be like when your children are uncomfortable. And this one sounds like people think you're crazy, but that uncle or aunt, we'll make it fair, that wants a hug, wants a kiss, whatever. Well, my kids are not obligated to make you feel better.
No. Yeah.
Those are boundaries. These things matter. You never know what's happening. You don't know what that kid senses or feels or whatever. But understanding that when it comes to family, external family, our priority is our children.
For sure. Yes. I'm sure that would be difficult to walk out, but you have to, again, educate yourself and actually know what you believe in order to actually have a consistent focus, because it's easy, I'm hurting this one's feelings, and I'm not saying, just intentionally hurt people. That's not what this is about. But your kids are your God-given responsibility. And so everything else, your marriage obviously is first and then your kiddos. But that comes, before any other relationship outside of that home. And so I have learned, just as you grow, that margin can become bigger. And it's not that, necessarily you think you're better or you think you know better, because you're still learning, right? But establishing those boundaries early can really create a lot less heartache when they're young versus when they're older and they've already got these things established and there was mixed messaging, all throughout their childhood. And now you're telling them, well, actually, it has to be consistent. And so
I think it matters in worldview. It matters in those things. It matters in keeping your kids safe. But ultimately, we can talk about external family, but the family that child's seeing every day.
Yes.
Mom and dad.
Yes.
How do they react? How do they handle things?
Yes.
How do they converse? How do they handle discipline?
Yes.
That's one of the things that I recognize, and I definitely don't always get it right. But my kids are forming their worldview on God based on the way that I discipline them.
Yeah. React when they make a mistake or whatever. And you've seen the meme before. The young guy wrecks his dad's sports car, and there's two reactions. One reaction is, oh no, he's going to kill me. And then the other reaction is, or no, what is it? I can't.
My dad, or yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, I don't want to tell him like he's going to kill me. And then the other one is, I can't wait to tell him like he'll know what to do to help me or whatever. And so you definitely want to have that relationship where they feel safe coming to you even when they've made a mistake.
That is one of the responsibilities that probably scares me more than anything, is the creation of their view of God.
It's pretty scary. Yeah, for sure.
Because that's something you don't necessarily outgrow.
No.
I've got a lot of things. My life is pretty much devoted. I mean, my vocation is the study of God's word. There are things that are in me because of what I've learned as a kid. And I can try to educate beyond that. And when because I'm not always dealing with things in God, you don't always deal with God in the conscience, in the conscious.
Yeah, when you put it in neutral.
Yeah, it's the subconscious. It's the
fabric of who you are.
Yes, it's there. And, I definitely don't get it right. And even having this conversation, I wasn't even planning to talk about this, but even having this conversation, it takes me deeper into the understanding. And mine may be even more so because you're a pastor, but here at home we don't even talk about that typically. We're just trying to be parents, but that responsibility, that's what's going to make them, that's going to form that.
Well, it's huge. Yeah. And I think, I can be vulnerable as well. I don't always get it right. I think reacting instead of responding, we actually talked about that in the workshop, but giving the response, the level of response that whatever the issue at hand is, instead of like always snapping or always freaking out about whatever, because there will be a time that you will need to give that much emotion or whatever to a particular thing. But if everything's a big deal, then nothing's a big deal.
And then you got to figure out, why do I react like that?
Yes.
What is it in me?
What a part? Yeah.
unpacking our own baggage before we hand baggage to our kids.
For sure,
carry.
for them to carry. Yeah.
So let's move on. We could talk about family and
All
those boundaries,
day.
all day long, literally. And maybe we should have broke this down into more segments. But friends, having boundaries with friends. One of our things, and I want to be. It's so funny because we're trying to be careful, like saying, well, this is what we don't do. I mean, there may be a day, but we're very, very particular. We don't do sleepovers. Like our kids have stayed at other houses if we are going away on a trip, and that is extremely rare. I mean, I'm talking our almost 10-year-old, probably hasn't been away 7-8 nights in her life.
Oh no.
From one of us, maybe one of us is traveling, the other one's not. But we set that boundary, and not everybody's going to be comfortable with that boundary. Not everybody's going to like that. But it's not about the friends.
No.
It's not about but I can't investigate everybody. I can't find out everything. And so that's a rule. That's a boundary. What are some other suggestions you would have for parents regarding friends, their kids, friends, peers?
So I would definitely encourage. Of course, you can't choose your kids' friends, but it does often help if the parents have a similar worldview, because then that child is going to be the product of their. You can't choose
your kids' friends, but you can choose where they find their friends.
Yes, you can.
By controlling where they go.
Yes, absolutely. And so what I would suggest there, and again, school, like you don't know who is, but I think having open conversations with your kiddos, that is so important. Doing or talking about role play. What would you do in this situation, McKinley? We actually just did that tonight. She was telling me about a friend, and she acted in a particular way, and I said, well, what did you do? And
I heard that.
What would Christ do in this situation? And she's like thinking, but it actually teaches them to be able to think through, even as adults, if you teach them young, to be able to think through things. Well, wait a minute, let me go back. And it becomes a foundational norm in their brains to think that through. Well, I can't do what my emotions, and actually boxing their emotions and, feeling what they feel, because we're emotional creatures, but not allowing that to kind of drive us, and saying, okay,
you're having emotions rather than your emotions having you.
That's right. And having, that biblical worldview and that scriptural, those scriptural thoughts, I guess is the word I'm looking for,
sure.
At the forefront. Like, okay, this situation, let me weigh it by scripture. And when you have those conversations and you're open, and I think we actually talked about this the other day, about like at night, your kids are stalling for time. They're thirsty. They've got to use the bathroom. So those are perfect times to actually talk about their day, talk about what they would have done in a situation where maybe, someone was getting left out. We try to pray for our kiddos that they'll have, a good friend that they can walk through, seasons of life with. I pray for their spouses every night. I think it is vitally important that you are intentional in your prayer. We have not because we ask not. And I truly believe that God hears specifics. And even as little as they are, it's important to teach them what to look for in a friend.
Let's talk about school. Not everyone can control school.
Yes.
There's a lot of factors that go into that, but school matters.
Yes.
But school matters. It matters. It forms worldview, all those things. But not everyone can afford private school. Some folks have great public schools where they are. Some may work in a school, be there with their kids.
Yes.
Some folks can homeschool, others can't. So what advice do you have for parents regarding making that school decision?
I think that you have to do what's best for your family, whether that's, financially, whatever is best for your family at the time. I think God can take any situation. Nothing is wasted in his hands. Everything works for our good, and I mean, you and I were, we had a public school education. So I don't believe that it's just all lost. And, if you go to public school, like it's, it's the end.
Granted, that was when the whole world hadn't shifted quite as radically as it has now.
Sure. But I also know that even though I went to public school, my worldview was shaped at home. Yeah. It was definitely what my parents prioritized. It was going to church. Our life was, church. And so I truly believe that even in a dark world, the light just shines brighter. I believe that you pray over, your child's education, whatever decision that you make, and you make, the right one for you and your family. Honestly, you can have several kids and homeschool might be good for that child and Christian school might be good for that child and public school, just based on personality, where you are, whatever. We've had those conversations in this house. Like, what would it look like? And we have those, open conversations very candidly with our kids. And it's funny how different they are. If you talk about homeschool with Reagan, she's like, oh yes, I want to be home all the time. That would be great. And then McKinley's like, don't you dare take me out of school. I want my friends. And so that, it definitely affects them differently. So I think you literally have to do, when I say family, I think you have to look at the individual, the child. They're going to have different propensities. They're going to have different, they're going to have different ways that they kind of relate to the world, their school, their friends, and you have the introverts, extroverts. So I think you have to be careful with that, and you have to be intentional. Going back to that,
I knew one guy that had one kid in public school, one kid in private school, and one kid homeschooled.
Yeah,
so it was all based on the child's needs as well. That being said, it's very important to be very careful what we do with our children. We are stewarding them. Sometimes we have to make difficult financial decisions. You and I, we make choices about education, changes what we drive, changes some of the things we do.
For sure. Changes our grocery budget.
Sure, yeah, it changes everything, but that's a decision that we've made. Now, the other thing, though, I would say also, if parents decide to homeschool, make sure you do it right. Don't not educate your child, or if you decide you're going to do some sort of private schooling, like make sure it's a reputable place, or if you're going to say, public school's for us, make sure you're in a good school. All those things matter because you are trying to educate your child as well. That being said, that is another reason why that it is a moral issue that states allow school choice. That is a big deal. That's not saying we don't need public schools. We do. We want the public to be educated, but there ought to be choice and there ought to be an opportunity for funding to follow the student as opposed to funding a system. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose of public education funds are to educate the public, not to support a public education system. And if a member of the public goes somewhere, then X amount of dollars should be able to flow with them. And that would give parents much more leeway. And that's why another reason parents need to be engaged. Like, for example, right now in South Carolina, trying to get school choice. For the record, if you're listening and you go, well, that's going to wreck the public school system. In states with full public choice, it's like 3% of students that actually pursue it, because a lot of people are not even thinking about that. And there's a lot of other issues and time and effort that has to go into that choice. That being said, that brings us to the last area of worldview. I think we've got the other 5, and that is laws. And we talked about, and laws are important because laws teach our kids what is right and what is wrong. And that's another reason why parents need to be engaged. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that tonight. There'll be a lot of other guests that will talk about laws and legal things and legislation and that sort of thing. And there's only X amount of control that you and I can have over that. But we can choose who we vote for.
Yes.
And we can choose what we advocate. We can choose to pick up the phone and talk about legislation. But when we think about it, something being illegal, that means it's wrong, right?
Yes.
And so it matters when we make things about gender legal or things about other immorality legal. That matters. And that's another reason that we need to be engaging that. I did see that you had dropped something the other day on Intentionally Yours. So everybody get over on your social media. Intentionally Yours, I know, is on Facebook. Is your page? Is that page? Do you have it anywhere else? Is it on Instagram or anywhere else?
On Instagram.
It's on Instagram as well. So get over there, follow Heather Conley on all the socials, get her content. She's always putting out great stuff. Do you have anything else that you want to drop for everybody before we call it a night?
No, I think we're good.
All right, everybody. God bless. I had a great time talking to my wife tonight.
Me too.
And for everybody else, I hope that this has been more than a conversation for you.
Thanks again for being part of More Than a Conversation today. If you'd like more content like this, check out my blog at www.pastorconley.com. That's PastorConley.com. Again, that's PastorConley.com. I'd also love to see you join us in worship at Garden Sanctuary. If you're ever in Rock Hill, South Carolina, or the greater Charlotte area, we'd love to have you stop by and worship with us. Check us out at www.gardensanctuary.org. That's gardensanctuary.org. Until next time, I hope this has been more than a conversation.